Welcome back to the 1904 Club podcast from the Hull Daily Mail. Kathryn is with me. Prutts is with me. We'll start with Kathryn. How are you?
You have to start with me. I've had a better few days, Baz, but yeah, I'm trying my best to stay as optimistic as possible. But after Saturday, it's pretty difficult, isn't it?
It is. First of all, congratulations on your award last week. You had an incredible few days with the stuff about Annie Luco, and we're not going to that, obviously. But congratulations on your big award last week.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was. It was a nice night before Hull City ruined the week. But yeah, thanks for that.
And Prutts looking lovely and tanned, fresh from his. Your acting is getting better. You might even get a gig on Mike Bassett 2 or Ted Lasso 4 or whatever the latest series is that's coming out with your.
From what I heard, the real money's in Ted Lasso, not Mike Bassett. So I'd take the latter over the former if that's okay.
Yeah, that was a fantastic advert. I really enjoyed. I'm not just saying it because you're here, but I really liked it. Shame about the location you picked, the baseball ground. But, you know, I'll get over that.
Yeah, I think the original one was done at Loftus Road, wasn't it? But there was some issue with us doing it there. Yeah, a bit of fun, poking a bit of fun at ourselves. We're never knowingly too serious, hopefully, especially in the EFL at Sky. Was the odd comment, which Mr. Mark completely, which people were sending me. So this isn't funny, Sky. David Mitchell did it 15 years ago. Yeah, we know that. That's why we've done it. Okay. But yeah, no, it's all about the bants at times, isn't it? And obviously the football is deadly serious. So to keep it light, we do stuff like that occasionally.
How many takes did it do? How many takes did it take you, I should say?
Well, it would take a professional a lot shorter time. So I can't work out what the sentence is that says that I'm crap at it. But because of all the very boring, if you've not seen it, you will have no idea what's on. Because of the way it's cut in, you've got to do each set of lines about 4 times. So there was me in a suit walking around Pride Park for the best part of 3 hours, which it was done as a parody. So obviously, but in the sense of they wanted me to wear the yellow shirt. The yellow shirt is obviously a nod to Jim White in it and David Mitchell taking off the yellowness of transfer deadline day. So that was the only thing that was there as a prop. The rest of it's all my gear. But one of the fellas, it was a fellow called Martin, who's lovely, and a fellow called Sahil, who's lovely as well, whose idea it was. So I proceeded to put my suit on and my shoes, and I walk out the tunnel, and they're absolutely cracked up. And I was like, so you know the yellow shirt that you bought is the only joke part of the outfit I'm wearing here. The rest of it is kind of gear that I quite like. And they were bent over double. And you're wearing those shoes as well. It's like, yeah, these are my best shoes. But yeah, he was good. And then obviously battered the life out of it over the Easter weekend. So there might even be something coming up for the playoffs. So God help you all.
Can't wait for that. Before we get into the nitty gritty of Hull City, you were at Wembley on Sunday for the semi-final. You were doing some more presenting gig, weren't you? And the reason I mention it is because Curtis Davies, Hull City legend and friend of the show, got the Sir Tom Finney Award, didn't he? Talk to us about that and what that was like, giving that to Curtis, who's now one of your regulars on Sky, isn't he?
Yes, he's been a great addition, Curtis. I've always found him a lovely fella. I'm sure if you two have come across him, you'll see what a nice fella he is. I having the privilege of being able to be there when that happens. We had Luke Chambers last year, another lad I played alongside. Joby McAnuff's obviously one of our regulars as well. And these incredible careers, you're talking about 3 players there that knocked out over 700 games, knocking on about 800. And I think I personally, from semi having a foot on the inside looking out, kind of the bit I respect the most is getting through that amount of quote unquote work, getting those games under your belt, building a career, because I know it's the very, very few percent that actually get to call it a job, but then to be able to do it for 20 years, I think is phenomenal. And he's done it in a way which is obviously affected everywhere he's been at. That's why he's fondly remembered at City. There won't be many clubs that Curtis Davies would have been at where they've gone. Thank God he's gone. Again, that's something I can't relate to. But the way that it was celebrated and the vibe in the room was reflective of a man that's very well respected and liked. So no, it's lovely to see stuff like that. A lot of football obviously is about picking apart mistakes and talking about things going wrong. cue the next 45 minutes of our chat in a second. But to be able to see that, and I mean Neil Warnock as well, he was there again. Chuck. You can take. It's one of those, and he even said it. He said a lot of times he got a contribution award, and he's spoken about going to clubs where he'd get an absolute shed load of abuse. But I would say most clubs would take him as manager. I think. I mean, if you're a Hull City fan listening to this, I'm sure at stages, I think a Neil Warnock on the touchline at the MKM or whichever incarnation of the City ground it would have been most welcome. But maybe that horse has bolted.
Well, there was talk, Kathryn, wasn't there, a few weeks ago of when I think it was after the Sheffield United game for Cardiff, and Omar Reza did that bizarre interview with.
That was very true. That stuff. That chat was true.
Yeah, about Warnock going back to Cardiff for 2 games. Obviously, appointed Aaron Ramsey, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still thinking, is he free for Saturday? One-off game, not to get rid of Ruben, just to maybe help him out for 1 game. He came on my TikTok the other day, Neil Warnock. I think it was at the EFL Awards. He was talking about how he'd nearly signed Virgil van Dijk, or he tried to sign. They told him he was too slow or something like that. But one of the few things you expect to see on TikTok is Neil Warnock, unless it's like an old clip of him sort of from that documentary back in the day.
Yeah, it's funny, that one. Yeah, it's he's embraced certain elements of that. It depends what medium he wants to work in next. He could become a TikTok superstar. I mean, even me saying TikTok superstar is probably about 5 years out of date. So if there's any kids listening to this, I really apologise. I mean,
basically, Sharon is desperate to get him out of the house. So whether it's TikTok, Instagram, God knows what else, just get out of the house, go and be on the telly. But yeah, great for Curtis. He's such a wonderful guy, and as you say, he's got plenty of skin in the game this weekend with City, Derby, and Luton all vying for 1 place in it. It sounds like, from what you've said, basically, if you go on Sky Sports and become one of your pundits, you'll get the Lifetime Achievement Award.
You'll get a Lifetime Achievement Award. Yeah, that's it. It's a bit of a straight line. I'm not saying I've got any say or sway in the conversation, but it sounds like that would be the case. It was funny watching that montage of him that was on. It showed him obviously scoring in the FA Cup, final, and it also showed Modiami's goal against Wednesday in the playoff final. And I just think, and we spoke to Steve Bruce, didn't we, in the summer, and we were chatting about kind of days gone by. And you look at the job that Scott Parker's done, that Daniel Farke's done, that potentially one of 4 is going to do at the end of this season. And I just think situations like that, given what the Premier League is now, and again, this is a bit of a tangent, that I just don't sense, sometimes I don't sense that people grasp the magnitude of that. City on that day against Wednesday kind of bottled down to London, took a little bit of pressure, didn't feel much jeopardy, scored a wonderful goal, and then just went, bye, we're back in the Premier League now. And I know this, and I'm not saying that just to kind of heap on what the situation is now, but properly heady days where they made the Championship look relatively straightforward, didn't they? On the occasions that we've seen City climb out of it. Yeah, the discussion about them being in the Premier League is a slightly different one, and obviously Steve moving on and half the team moving on very, very, very quickly. But I just remember that being a day where, for all of my knowledge of Hull City over the years and watching them a little bit in the 80s in the old 3rd division and what they'd kind of grown into, the Ian Ashbys of this world that had gone through and managed to show what could be possible, and Dino's legendary volley as well. To see that team against a Wednesday side that have been miles off the Premier League for a generation was just glorious to watch in their kind of composure and dealing with the situation. It just seems like a long time ago now, doesn't it?
Well,
Which,
Kathryn,
I mean, literally is.
Well, it couldn't be further from it. Kathryn, let's talk then about the Derby game briefly before we look ahead to the weekend. 1-0 defeat. It felt like so many before it, didn't it? Lots of possession, plenty of moments in the game, but complete lack of cutting edge, zero cutting edge, no ruthlessness. I think at 13 attempts on goal, just 2 on target. And then the classic sucker punch comes from Derby, a rare Derby attack, and they win the game with 6 minutes to go.
Yeah, and I think I said after the game that end of the season, if they end up going down, we can have kind of the inquest in terms of who's to blame and why it's happened. But that result, that one particular result, I think you have to look at the manager as much as you look at the players for not performing. Mainly because I couldn't get over how he didn't make a sub until, well, apart from the ones that were enforced because of injury, he didn't make an attacking sub until the 87th minute when they were 1-0 down. And we didn't look like scoring before that. I mean, every kind of time we got near Derby's goal, we were just shooting from long range. And we were shooting sort of miles over the bar. I mean, professional footballers, you think you might get sort of one of the shots on target. It was just kind of like, and bless kind of Amrabat, I think his was maybe the one that sort of tipped me over the edge when he sort of got into position and just sort of hit it in rows ed. He was actually one of the few players that, despite his kind of age, he was actually looking like he might create something. He does try really hard, even if he hasn't got much quality. But some of the kind of finishing from the whole team, really, it was just kind of, you're just looking at them thinking, what's the plan here? What are they trying to do? I don't know what the tactics are. Why have we got our top scorer on the bench? I know he's not been playing particularly well, recently anyway, but we need a goal. If we'd have won that game, we'd have been safe. So it was almost kind of like we weren't doing enough to try and win the game. We were just almost happy with a point, but we then end up losing it. And they kind of didn't have themselves to blame. But yeah, the lack of substitutions, I just couldn't really work that out, because it was similar against Luton. He did make subs a bit earlier in that game. Obviously, they conceded earlier. But again, I didn't think the subs that day were right. And making 3 subs in the 87th minute when you're 1-0 down, I mean, it rarely makes a difference. And I didn't really get his explanation after the game as to why he waited so long as well.
Yeah, there was a moment, Prutts, in the first half where City they came out the traps really well. They were snapping into tackles, and you thought, right, they're really at it. The crowd were brilliant, right behind them, sellout crowd. And they'd got Derby pinned back on the edge of their own box, and they were City pushing. And then the ball, it kind of got worked wide to the left-hand side, went to Louis Coyle in the middle of the park. And instead of going, keeping the hammer down on Derby, he went all the way back to Ivor Pandor. And it was kind of a moment that kind of almost encapsulated their season, that they just have zero idea of what they're trying to do in an attacking sense. And that's been the same under 2 managers all season, or 3 if you count.
Yeah, I mean, is that reflective? I'm not just saying this because it's Louis and I've got a lot of time for Louis. I like him immensely. But is that not kind of a reflection or example of a team that's possibly a little bit scared, a little bit kind of reticent to kind of almost, it's safety first? I mean, by virtue of what you're saying, that's literally safety first, isn't it? Going back to your goal instead of taking a chance, which is where goals come from. I'm not mansplaining how goals come from to anyone listening to the podcast, but it comes from risk and reward, doesn't it? You put the ball into an area which could cause the opposition problems, and whether that's a mentality thing, whether that's Ruben saying, let's make sure that we don't concede, even though you are obviously passing back from a hell of a long way out. I don't know. It surprises me, because the facts of the matter going into the game, as Kathryn's absolutely nailed, is you win the game, you're fine. Which, I mean, to have that with another game left, I don't know. Maybe there's maybe I'm thinking about it too deeply. There's a subconscious kind of thought that, well, if we don't do it in this game, we'll do it in the next game. Then you kind of think, well, no, you've got to take into account everyone else's results, because you're not in that safe position where you can just keep knocking games off and then it's still be in your own hands, because now it's completely switched going into a weekend where you look at the other fixtures. There's so many that would result in sending City down, aren't there? There's not many that you're looking around going, well, I bank on that. Even if City don't do whatever, that might happen. They might get a point. It's just so fraught.
Yeah, and what I would say is they've had 7 games since the international break, and I can't remember too many occasions in those 7 games where they've taken risks, where they've played, they've tried to think outside the box. Everything has been so safe. It's been, it's just been like that. There's been very few times where you've thought they're trying to cut teams open, they're trying to be positive and play on the. I said this to Ruben a few weeks ago. Are your players struck by fear? The fear of losing a game, of what the impact of losing a game and being relegated? And he said, no, I don't think it's fear. I asked him. I said to him on Saturday, why didn't you bring on? The game was that second half. You were having moments, but why didn't you bring on Casey Palmer, the sort of player that could unlock unlock at defence. He's got that X factor. He can score a goal from out of nowhere. He can create something. We saw it against, I think it was Oxford when he came off, and he played a lovely ball in for Gowhart to score. And he said, he felt the team were doing right. Everything was going the right way. I said, I explicitly said to him, did you feel that in that final 15 minutes your team were going to score? Did you feel like the momentum in the game was going to bring your team a goal? And he said, yes, he did. That's why he didn't make those changes. Now, you can only ask the question and you get the answer, and then you have to agree with it or you don't. But Prutts, in that context, are you thinking that he's right? Are you thinking that he didn't? Obviously, he was forced to bring off Regan and John Egan earlier in the game for injuries. But as Kathryn said, he waited until after the goal had gone in before he brought on three, Pedro Burstow and who was the other one? Pedro Burstow and I've got my mind.
Look, Pedro Burstow, Crooks.
That was it. Yeah. He didn't bring on Casey, which still blows my mind now.
Yeah, it's quite hard to second guess because it's very easy to sit there and say, should have done that, I would have done that, and that by virtue is what it is when you pay money as a fan. You're absolutely within your rights to say that. I don't know. I mean, he's a highly qualified coach. He's got some real world experience at clubs where it's not the run of the mill experience that you would have had at other places. So I think you've got to put faith and trust in the fact that what he's saying there is not true in the sense of whether he's telling the truth or not, but what he genuinely felt in the moment. Because hindsight's wonderful. I mean, you look at the goal, and you mentioned Louis going back and not taking a risk. Yes, it's slightly different from a set piece, and that's a big statuesque figure for Derby, isn't it? But pick him up, mark him. Don't let. I mean, he's a powerful header of the ball, and it looks like a relatively free header because he's such a good header of the ball. But work harder to stop him getting a decent contact on it. And again, this is all hindsight. And maybe you get to that point, as you're saying, with 15 minutes to go, where he's half thinking, I understand people's frustrations about us not going after the game, but I also don't want to lose the game. Maybe there's something in that.
Yeah, maybe.
That again, going back to risk and reward, inevitably what happens when you are a team that's goal shy and can't necessarily kill off other sides, then you end up in a position where you are creeping towards the end of the season with fear gripping the whole team, not just the team on the pitch, but the team on the side of the pitch as well. Not saying that Ruben Sellers is managing from a fearful point of view, but just you must be sat there, and you two will know far more about us than I do, having speaking to the amount of people and managers post and pre-match, that you kind of, there must be so many things. Yes, he's paid to do it, but there must be so many things going through his head of, well, if I put him on, will that happen? If that happens, does that happen? And you've got to try and second, third, fourth guess the decisions that potentially you're going to make.
Kathryn, how crucial did you think to the momentum and the way that City were playing was Regan going off after what, 15? Well, I think it was 13 minutes, because he started really well. He had that chance where he buzzed around, everybody urged him to shoot, and he did. He didn't catch it well, and he hurt his ankle. Then he went off, and they seem to. I always feel Alzate slows the game down. He doesn't really break the lines with his passing. He's neat and tidy, but Regan is the dynamic player, isn't he? He tries to make things happen. And he's got that ability to break the lines, go beyond, and create something, as we've seen in the last few weeks.
Yeah, and I think Alzate and Puerta don't really work as a two.
No,
I think every kind of time they've played together, it's just for whatever reason they don't seem to balance each other. And yeah, I think we really missed kind of Slater's energy. And that's why I found it kind of so strange, as you mentioned, that somebody like Palmer, he's not the same as Slater, but he does kind of bring you that level of energy and creativity. Why he just didn't come on the pitch at all. Even like I don't think Matt Crooks particularly deserved to come on after what he did at Swansea and his stupidity there. But I think maybe him coming on instead of Alzate, I know he's not really a deep line midfielder, but maybe that would have been a better balance potentially. And we've seen when he does play well, he can nick you a goal. He can kind of get in the box. And you know, that goal against Sheffield United was a fine example of kind of him breaking forward, and he's just obviously not played very well. And I think maybe a lot of people probably felt let down by him, in his red card at Swansea and his kind of performance there. But he maybe would have been a better kind of fit for coming on for Slater than Alzate would have been. However, Alzate's had a reasonably good season. But I just feel like, and I know they conceded late, but even with the time that was remaining in the game, and when they were losing at Swansea, I never think like when the game's closing, we never just sort of throw the kitchen sink at the opposition. It's like we've got everyone in the box, and it's like, right, pile forward and really kind of put the opposition under pressure and just kind of put tactics out of the window and just really try and score a goal. It's and maybe that is because they're too kind of rigid in the football they're playing, and they just feel like they can't kind of launch it forward. Or
who does that remind you of, Kathryn? That way of playing? I mean, rewind almost exactly a year. Different ends of the table, but it's
exactly that. I think we even said it last season, didn't we? When City were losing under Rossini, they just weren't able to kind of abandon principles and try and score. And I know managers always say, well, no, we don't want them to abandon principles because blah 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 blah. But sometimes in the final 5 minutes, you've just got to shove Alfie Jones up front and see if he can win a header, or put Sean McLaughlin in the box, and it just feels like we don't do that. And then it looks like to the fans that they're not trying, but like they're not desperate to score a goal because they're just sort of like pondering about. If that
there's no urgency. I think that's the key word in football, isn't it? When you get to that, and it's a bit of a crap example, but Man United don't get through in Europe if they don't launch Harry Maguire up, who looks completely out of place. Like what? But bang, on the end of it, done. It's not. And obviously it's damning them with faint praise, but it's no. It almost seems, and go back to your point, Kathryn, it almost seems kind of anti-football for them to do that, when I think collectively everyone in the stand would have gone, we absolutely do not mind what it looks like at all. Just keep shell it in. And as much as Nat scored a great header at one end, go make him defend in his own. Get everyone back and get Derby on the kind of back foot with it all and put them under pressure. I do think, and I don't think we get sucked into it in the media, because it's a point that I always try and make when we are talking about stuff like this. I totally get the educational side of what football is. I mentioned Liam there, a vastly superior footballing thinker than I ever will be. And he's had the what's to go and actually go and prove it and stand on the touchline and lead teams. It's an amazing thing to do. But I do think we can over-intellectualise it when none of us would be. You both wouldn't be writing a match report on the following morning saying, well, they won, but it wasn't pretty. It was like, who cares? Right now, do you think Matt Bloomfield cares how it looks? That the way that his side went at it over the Easter weekend? Not in the slightest. Not at all.
Because that's exactly the point, and you do what you've got to do. And I was thinking in my head of United against Lyon, in that, and to be honest, I saw it when United came to the City ground a couple of weeks ago, and they Amorim lumped on Maguire, and then I was listening to some people afterwards talking about, well, it's desperation chucking Maguire up front, and it's this and it's that. It's an admission that
but you can use the D word. It's fine because it's a desperate situation, isn't it? That's
it is. And if at the end of the game, the last 5 minutes at City, you're chucking Alfie Jones up front, and you're chucking Charlie. We saw what Charlie Hughes did against Sheffield Wednesday. That bullet header, get him up, chuck them all up front. You're losing the game 1-0. Yes, goal difference might be the fans would be like, well, at least we've chucked in 10 crosses in the last 5 minutes, and we're trying to play off the second ball and hope we get a knockdown. Derby aren't great. Let's hope that something falls our way and we've got somebody there to prod it in from a yard out. But then you never, like Kathryn's bang on, you never felt like that because it's got to go wide and we've got to work it back into midfield. We're trying to work that. We're trying to work the opening, and we've got all these stats that say, well, if we lump in across, only one of them ever reaches our man because 9 of them get cleared, and all that stuff that Brentford have. Well, we don't take shots from outside the box because the XG of shooting from outside the box is this, and we've got to work that perfect opportunity before we can put the ball. Well, I'm sorry, but you're in a relegation battle at the bottom of the championship. You've got to do what you've got to do to try and find a goal from somewhere. They've scored. The 7 games since the international break, they've scored 1 goal from open play, and that was Abu Kamara's deflected shot that wasn't going in against Coventry. They've scored 1 goal from they scored Charlie Hughes' from a set play at Hillsborough, and they scored 2 penalties. They've scored 1 goal, 1 deflected goal from open play in 7 games. It's pathetic.
It's that, and it's good to chuck the examples in is absolutely right. Like you said about Brentford, and obviously Brentford's what they've done is phenomenal. The minute Brentford are in a relegation scrap, there's absolutely no way they're chucking XG up and going, well, if you do it this way, whoever's down there is going forward and pumping it forward, aren't they? You know, that's always going to be the case. That's how this works. And if you don't, you end up like Southampton. If you don't, potentially you end up like Hull City.
They're trying to score the perfect goal every week. And it's always like it comes out, they work it wide, and if the cross isn't there, they come back, and then they end up going back to the goalkeeper. And that's it. What you end up with a situation with Louis, that they've gone from side to side. They can't break Derby's low block, as it's called now. So they end up working it back into midfield. Yeah, they keep the ball, great. But then it ends up back at the goalkeeper, who then has to lump it to a side, and you probably then got Craig Forsyth going up for a challenge with Abu Kamara and winning the header, and Derby have it back. So it's like it's pointless. At some point, you've got to play a percentage and try and get the ball in the box. There was a moment against Luton, we picked it out on the podcast previously, where they were, City were supposedly on the attack, but I think they got 2 players in and around the Luton penalty area against 8 Luton defenders. Well, they're not going to score if you've got 2. And it's like, do you know what I mean? It blows you as a fan or somebody in the media. You watch it on, you're going, you're battling for survival in the Championship. This trying to be too, you can't be too structured. And it's so frustrating. Sometimes you've got to have a go. What Burns has said last season, before Christmas, last season, have a go at the coconut. At some point, you've got to have a go. You've got to shoot, or you've got to fizz the ball in the box with some, ferocity that you might get a ricochet. You might get. How many goals have we seen Hull City score against themselves by balls in the box? It's not rocket science, Kathryn, is it?
No, and I think as well, like this kind of it comes back to. They don't look like a team that are fighting to stay in the league. They look like a team that are ready for to go on the beach and just have another season of Championship football next season. But that's because of this football that they're sort of playing. And I think it can get confused with people thinking that they don't care, because I think they are trying. I don't think it's a lack of effort. I think it's just they've got no confidence. And I think too many of them are playing like they're annoyed. I don't want to kind of pick on Charlie Hughes because he's been brilliant, but at the end of the game, some of the fans booing, it happens. You're in the bottom 3, you could get relegated. Another really poor performance at home. Whether you think it's right or wrong to boo, fans are going to boo. It happens. It doesn't matter which team you're at. If you're having a really bad spell, fans are going to boo. And he kind of turned round to the North Stand and sort of held his hands up as if to say, like, why are you booing? And he's obviously one of the few players that, maybe I don't know if he thought they were booing him, because, he's probably one of the few that's actually been playing quite well. And they obviously weren't booing him directly. They're just booing the situation, the performance, the tactics, whatever. And there's just been a few different things where Sean McLaughlin, another one who I think absolutely does care, because he's been at the club for a long time and he gives absolutely everything. On social media, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but after the Preston game, put this kind of post out saying, we need the atmosphere from the second half throughout the whole game against Derby, as if to kind of say, well, the atmosphere wasn't good enough in the first half, and that's why we're 1-0 down at half time. Now, I'm putting words into his post there, but that's kind of how it felt like to me, him saying we need that second half atmosphere for the whole game.
Well, Joe Gelhardt said that. Joe Gelhardt did say that. And
I'm just sort of thinking, well, the atmosphere was perfectly fine. You can't blame that for you conceding. Sometimes when they've scored goals, Louis Coyle just looks angry, just looks frustrated. Every time it's celebrating, it's as if to be like, yeah, have that. It's not celebrating fans. And it's just sort of like, it's like so many of them are playing like they're frustrated and they're angry. And I don't know whether they think they've had too much stick from the fans, but suck it up and grow up. I think like they're just sulking a little bit. You've had an awful season. Fans are going to boo whether you think it's right or not. And you can't kind of blame the atmosphere at a home game for you not performing. And like Baz was saying at the start of the game, the atmosphere was great. It was a full house. Everyone was behind the team. You've got to give them something to cheer about as well. Regardless of that, the away end at Portsmouth on Saturday will absolutely 100% be behind them. They will have the support of everyone in that away end for like the 90 minutes. So they'll have absolutely no excuses. But there's just been little kind of things like that have frustrated me, because it looks like they're just kind of feeling sorry for themselves rather than sort of saying, you know, right, we're going to go and prove people wrong and we're going to stay up and we're going to, you know, we're going to do it for the fans. It's almost like they're frustrated by them. And I know they've had criticism all season, but it's part of being a footballer. You're paid quite a decent amount of money to do this job. You're going to get criticism. You're going to get booed every now and again. You've just got to suck it up.
And that was the thing. Like even at Swansea, you know, there were what, 590 went down to Swansea on Good Friday in terrible weather, and
I was one of them.
Yeah, exactly. And the fans were brilliant all the way through the game. They were as loud as they could be. They backed them. They cheered them on. It was 100% positive. But then obviously they lost the game, and fans then get angry because they've paid a lot of money. They've travelled on Easter weekend, and they've seen the team lose again. It was the same against Derby. You know, it wasn't a lack of effort against Derby, but there was a massive lack of quality, and the fans have just had it. You know, they've seen 5 wins at home in 23 games all season. Well, if in fact, if you include the Sheffield Wednesday reserve game in the cup and then Doncaster, 25 home games, they've seen 5 wins, and it also dovetails. There you go. It dovetails back to last season where I think they only won 8 times at home, and that is the reason they didn't with the squad. And we're not going to get into the Liam Rossini chat because he's doing great at Strasbourg. We love him. All power to him, and you know all that can wait for whatever happens after the season. But the home form was the reason that team last year didn't get in the playoffs. So they've seen 12 home wins in the best part of 50 games at City. So I'm not surprised the home fans are a bit knocked. But it's that from a player's point of view, it's that old chestnut, isn't it? Is right. The players need to give the fans something at home, but the fans need to get behind the players. It's that tricky balance of who gets behind, who gives who what.
Yeah.
Who
gets everyone going. Yeah. And I absolutely agree with everything Kathryn said there because and I've been in a situation at Swindon and Southampton when we were battling at the bottom. And what happens over the course of a season is the trepidation creeps in because of what the fans have seen with their own eyes, which is absolutely viable and totally understood because, again, they pay the money, they go in, they know exactly how this current incarnation of the team looks in the context of supporting this football club. And the right to make a judgment. That's what the noise is for. The cheer when you do something good. It's very straightforward. The cheer when you do something good and the boo when you do something bad. And looking at it from a slightly older vantage point now with many years away from it, there is an element of what Kathryn's saying, which is about grow up and take it on the chin. We'd mentioned when Tim was moved on about players suggesting that the atmosphere had changed and maybe the way that he was managing the side was not something they were getting on board with. Again, tough. You're not going to have the same manager for 15 years that's going to love you in exactly the same way and have training and have your week planned out and have the games where you play every single game. It doesn't happen, does it? So that's where the professional side of what being a player comes into, where you got to get on with the parameters that are set by whoever sets those parameters. And those few voices that were saying about almost kind of lightening the mood. Again, I've been there where a manager's gone and it's been crap, and you go, "Well, thank God he's gone. I thought it was rubbish," and everyone starts kind of moving in different dynamics. And that normally, Swindon was rubbish. I had players in that team that are still very, very good friends of mine. There's lads in that team that, I mean, a lot of them I won't make a beeline to say hello to. Yes, you move on from the point of view of, do you remember what it was like back then? Yeah, it was rubbish. And hopefully you've matured that you can have that little bit of a chat. But you spend a very intense amount of time with people, and sometimes you've got fond memories of it, others you're not. I think as a collective, we're all responsible for taking that team down. I would have reacted to different things to ways differently to the man next to me. That's probably why you end up in that position. Southampton was similar. We meandered through a season. There were managerial changes, players left. But still, ultimately, it's the team's responsibility to take that on board and show A, that you care, and B, that you've got the quality to be in that division. Now, the care point of view, again, going back to Kathryn's point, it doesn't strike me as a team and a squad full of mavericks and kind of loners that don't care about where they are. I've never got that vibe off City at all. more the vibe that I've got more about not caring is again to nick everything Kathryn just said is a bit of that self-pity type one, which can be just as destructive as it would be to not care, I think. So if you end up in feeling sorry for yourself in the bottom three, then where's the fight? Where's the kind of collective anger? Not the anger of, well, you're booing us, you're saying this. No, that's why you play in front of crowds, because they pay the money to come in. And maybe I'm saying this as a man that's, again, 10 years out of the game, and it would have probably got on my nerves that someone might have been giving you a bit of feedback, shall we say, even though you are trying your best. But I totally get the situation that they find themselves in, and the debate that comes about what the atmosphere is like at home spreads far back beyond the start of this season. And a whole City fan can make as much noise or as little noise as they want. How much does it cost to watch City?
It's a lot less than a lot of other clubs, but it's still pricey, isn't it? It's still football costs people money.
And if you're going with that old kind of cliche, if you're going with your kids and you're going to the club shop and you're going to buy a drink and that's a strange thing about football. I love it. But you get told to do a lot, don't you, as a fan? No, you can't have a beer out there. Can you sort of over there and do that? You know what I mean? You can have that, but it costs that. You've got to park there. You've got to go over there. Don't say that. Sit down, stand up. You know what I mean? Like, sorry, no. The team's not doing great, so I'm going to tell the team it's not doing great. I tell you whose fault it fundamentally isn't, Baz, is yours.
Well, yeah. I mean, according to one punter on Saturday, it's all my fault who decided to stand up and shout at me in the middle of the West Stand after Derby had scored.
I've got absolutely no time for that. That's almost kind of Twitter in real life, isn't it? I can't believe you've done this. Done what? Given opinion on a team that I'm paid to cover. Well, sorry, that's what you do. Otherwise, all you do is wait for a match day, and do the post-match every week, wouldn't you? Then you'd go, right, see you off, see you in a week. Can't make any judgment or opinion on the form of City or who might be the next manager, who's going to come in, or what the players are going to do, or second guess what the owner's going to do. I'll literally just come along and say, Hull City 0, Derby 1. See you next week.
Yeah.
Make your life a lot easier, Baz. Sounds like a much nicer job.
I'm not sure.
Filing copy would be like that, wouldn't it?
Yeah. But no, look, it's one of them, isn't it? And look, a lot of the players that were around last year took the adulation of what was a really good season. You know, they've gone from being, since they've come back from League One, 4 or 5 years ago, they've been battling. They've been in the lower table. They've been battling to stay in the league for the most part. Liam came in, turned them from a team that were battling to stay in the league to a team that finished 7th. Yes, we've dissected that before. Yes, they should have, they could and should have done better with the squad that Liam had at his disposal, but they still had a good season. And a lot of those players, Alfie Jones, I love Alfie. I think he's a great lad, but he had a shocker on Saturday. Egan was brilliant, came off injured. Alfie comes on, makes that rash tackle. Probably you say at the time he's got to make it because if Mendes-Lang goes past, there's a problem. But then he doesn't pick up Phillips, so that they concede the goal. Coyle, McLaughlin, Regan. There's a few players that were around last season that were hailed and all had great seasons. Yes, they missed out, but they had a really good go at it, and it wasn't for the want of trying. So you have an awful season, and the season has been awful. It's not been one specific reason. There's been a lot of reasons as to why they are where they are. But if you take the adulation when you have a relatively successful season, then you have to be big enough to say, look, I've not played well. Because, it's not City aren't having a rubbish season just because Louis Cole's had a poor season.
It's never one reason. Unless you get a 25-point deduction, you know what I mean? Which, again, would be the sum total of a lot of other mistakes clubbed together. You're right, mate. It's never one reason, never one person. It might boil down to what that kind of, if you were in a position where you're at the last game of the season, someone gives a penalty away and misses a sitter, people might go, oh, it was that reason. No, it's never that. It's never that. You heard Neil Harris talk about Cambridge, which has obviously been put to the theme tune, the song Park Life, which kind of takes the edge off what he's saying. But he's kind of saying this club is in this situation not because of losing this game or a poor Easter. It's collective, and that club's an example. That's a couple of seasons worth of that type of stuff. It eventually, if you're pushing it all up the hill, it'll come sliding back down, which is where we find ourselves going into the last game of the season.
Look at Cardiff; they've been circling the drain for a period of time. It's eventually got the Kathryn. In terms of City, And if they do lose at Portsmouth, they don't get relegated because as Prutts says, because they've lost at Portsmouth. You can go, if we wind back, and this is something we'll talk about over the summer, but if we wind back to pre-season, and Acun did the press conference in Turkey, and basically, we talked about signings, how basically we're going to have to wait until the end of the window and almost, not in so many words, admittedly, but almost sacrifice August because we won't get our squad together until the end of the transfer window. Well, you're almost sacrificing, if they had, 3 draws and a couple of defeats. If they'd have picked up a point or 2 points in that period, they wouldn't be in this situation now. And then there's games throughout the season, always ifs and buts. If we'd not have conceded that goal against Watford in Ruben's first game, if Regan had made that tackle, his words, not mine. If you'd have done this, if you'd have done that, it's not because they've lost at Portsmouth or they lost to Derby or they lost to Luton. It's a collective. They've won 12 games in 45. That's why they are where they are. But it all charts for me back to a really, really poor summer. Sacking Liam is there. It was done. He wanted Tim. He got Tim. He thought that Tim was the guy that could be like David Wagner, who took Huddersfield up, that Daniel Farke, who took Norwich up and has now gone up with Leeds. Danny Roll, who's doing a fantastic, in difficult circumstances, done a great job relatively at Hillsborough. Other German managers that have come in, he thought that Tim was that man. It didn't work, but largely recruitment has been, some of it's been very good, but some of the key parts of it have been really bad. But it's a collective, isn't it? But ultimately, as Prutts will probably allude to in a bit, there's one guy at the top that carries the can at every single football club. Every single football club, there's one person at the top, and they're in charge of the whole business. And if it goes belly up, they carry the can.
Listen, when Acun first came in and took over the club, they were outside the bottom 3 in the Championship, and it could be in a situation where they end up being worse off than we were when he came in, back to kind of back to League One. And I just think sometimes I don't. Obviously, stuff happened with Tan, and I don't think him leaving is the problem. But I do think the lack of guidance, maybe from somebody experienced in working in football, hasn't helped. I do think maybe sometimes Acun's made decisions, kind of sort of rash decisions potentially. I think the one with Liam is one of them. Bringing in Tim Walter, I don't know what the research was there, because anyone you speak to in Germany thinks he didn't do particularly well at Hamburg. I mean, there was a lot of people that didn't like him there, so I don't know where that kind of came from. I mean, his first appointment of Shota Arveladze was a strange one. It's only really the Liam Rosenior appointment, which he didn't want to do. First of all, he tried to get Pedro Martins in, didn't he? He kind of almost had to appoint Liam in the end. And I do think Ruben Sellers is. I think obviously we kind of both thought that he was a good appointment, and obviously, like if he'd have come in the summer, the average of points that he's got, we maybe would be safe. I can understand now people are thinking, well, Alex Neil was close to getting the job, and he's got Millwall on the verge of the playoffs. Hindsight, in that sense, is quite a valuable thing, but I'm not sure Alex Neil would have had us on the verge of the playoffs. Obviously, he walked into a much better situation at Millwall than he would have done if he'd got this job. There was other options. There was Mark Robbins, who's gone to Stoke. I mean, someone said on Twitter, like, we could have gone for Eustace. Those two managers could still get relegated, by the way. Stoke and Derby could still go down. So I actually don't think the appointment of Sellers is kind of one of his worst. I actually think he's a good coach, like Prutts said, and I think if he went down, I think he'd probably do all right in League One, obviously depending on what squad he had. But sometimes I do wonder if he's actually the man for a relegation fight, and I think you can see sometimes by the way his players, it doesn't look like him or the players are hurting, and maybe they hide it well, but I think it sort of takes me back to the Grant McCann era, and I didn't think he was a man for a relegation fight. He's very much a man for taking teams up, through the lower divisions. And I think there's a lot of similarities between this team and the one that went down 5 years ago, in the sense of the disconnect between the players and the fans, and that feeling of it doesn't look like it's hurting them. And I can remember that when they went down last time, the only player that seemed to be sort of distraught on the pitch was Keane Lewis Potter, and that was because he was, a boyhood Hull City fan, and everyone just seemed to kind of sort of shrug their shoulders and, not saying not care, but it just didn't look like it was hurting them. And I think that's what the fans want to see. You know, I'm a fan of this club, and all the other fans of Hull City want, you know, we care so much about this team, and it'll be us that, you know, have to that feel the pain of the relegation, you know, when you go down to League One. And some of the players might not be here next season, and maybe that's why they kind of think, well, I'll just go on somewhere else. But you kind of want the players to feel the same pain that you're doing, and I'm just kind of not getting that. I've kind of gone off on a tangent there, but to go back to in terms of what you were saying about who's responsible, yeah, the man at the top is always responsible for what happens. It was the same when Ehab was in charge. As much as we could blame Grant McCann for, you know, what the performance is on the pitch towards the end of that season, Ehab sold the best 2 players in January, and you know, it always comes back down to the people that make the decisions, and unfortunately, Adjun's decisions haven't been good enough.
And the other thing, Prutts, obviously, when the club appointed Ruben, you talked about Matt Bloomfield. As Kathryn said, you know, John Eustace was spoken to, as was Mark Robbins. They could still all get relegated. What I do know is Alex, as we said at the time, Alex Neil was interviewed. His presentation blew a lot of people at the club away with how good it was. But what we also can say is at that time, social media is only a snapshot of society. Of course it is, and not always a good snapshot. But there was a lot. If City had have appointed Alex Neil above Ruben Sayers, there would have been a massive outcry from a lot of supporters, and particularly there was a lot of supporters I saw on social media when Ruben Sayers, his Hull City team, won at Millwall against Alex Neil's team in mid-January. A lot of fans were going, "Well, I'm glad we got Ruben because look, and you know, I was surrounded by Millwall fans. They were effing and blinding at Alex Neil and slagging him off, and you know, all through the game, we're hammering him. And now they could get in. They're now a point outside the top 6 with a game to go and could finish 6th. But if hindsight's wonderful, and I was thinking back to the guy that abused me on Saturday. He may well have been one of the 20,000 odd that was stood up singing Ruben's name before kickoff when the atmosphere was amazing. They were singing Ruben Sayers' name when Derby was singing about John Eustace. So football, hindsight's always wonderful in football, and we're always there's a massive fickle nature. And I just think if you go back and you say, right, fans, we're going to appoint Alex Neil. We've interviewed Ruben Sayers, but we don't want Ruben Sayers. We're going to appoint Alex Neil. A lot of fans would have gone, "Oh my Christ, that's such a boring appointment." Didn't you think?
Yeah, but boring normally gets you safe pretty.
Yeah, I can't believe Millwall are on the verge of playoffs because the 2 times they've played, they're an awful team. They've got the really boring team, but there you are. They could be in the playoffs. I know, that's what I mean. I don't think Alex Neil would have come in. He's clearly gone into a much better situation at Millwall in terms of where the club was in the table, and also kind of, it wasn't like they were sort of low on confidence or anything like, you know, the situation where I think we were bottom when Ruben came into us. So I don't think, you know, Alex Neil would have suddenly taken us to the playoffs. But yeah, maybe he could have. Maybe we might be safe by now. But you're never going to know that, are you? And like you said, I mean, I don't think he'd have been a popular choice at the time. And it's all good and kind of well saying, yeah, well, maybe they should have gone for him. Again, like, that's the ownership's decision. They're the ones in those meetings. I did see someone on Twitter saying that it was mine and your fault because we wanted Ruben. And they said they weren't blaming us, but almost not blaming you, but I also am blaming you.
I mean that's just utter rubbish. And I mean the debate about what social media chucks up, which is you now know everyone's opinions, and there was a time when you didn't know everyone's opinions, and you'd probably say fundamentally the world was a better place. And without sounding too sweet, it's like I've got in touch to tell you this when. If someone said that on the street, there'd be 2 words you'd tell them and walk past them because you wouldn't give them the time of the day, would you? But that debate about because professionally you're asked questions, and what I have seen from Ruben in a team that not just a team but a club in Reading that's a real tough task. Obviously, experience at Southampton as well was, and you've got to be inherently positive. I'm never going to sit there and say X and Y manager would be terrible for that job. Because I speak to all these managers. I'm not saying it's an old boys club or trying to keep people on. I know Alex Neil. I think he would have been a perfect fit for Hull City. I think he would have got players in, and this is throwing no shade on the likes of Crooksy or Joe Gelhardt, etc., because I think they're absolutely performative at this level and further up the division. But I think he would have given them something slightly different because of his experience, because of his strengths as both a coach and as a man in a situation of being in control and needing to take control of a situation. I've seen it firsthand. It's phenomenal to say. But they didn't choose him. And if you were clapping that and saying, great, because it would be a boring appointment. I know football's about emotions and the ups and the downs, but if you were one of those people saying that would have been boring and now looking at the jeopardy and staring down the barrel, then it looks a bit silly, doesn't it, really? Because Ruben might need a longer run up at it. Alex might know the championship in a way that knows that, right, Christ, we've got to get this done now. Time's wasted. I mean, we've lost these amount of months and we've got these amount of results. We need to go in this direction pretty sharpishly and head for safety. Other ones that you spoke about there, John Eustace, you get the feeling with John, there was a lot of geography that was involved in that, even though he's got Derby playing in a way that broadly has been a success, but as you quite rightly point out, could still go down. Mark Robbins and Stoke City, I don't think that's a Mark Robbins problem. I think it's a Stoke City personnel problem. Not finishing in the top half of the table since coming down from the Premier League is disgraceful, really, isn't it? Let's be honest. Given what they were built on, and given the players that have been through that football club and the management that's been through that football club. So there's so much in it. I mean, Luton's probably the one out of all of this, which is a bit more of an outlier, given, yes, they were in the Premier League last season. But again, that was a group of players that far exceeded an expectation. And with a great respect, like the Leeds team that went up under Marcelo Bielsa, you wouldn't have cherry-picked a single one of those players possibly as a Premier League team. And I do mean that with a great respect. Carlton Morrison was only going to get to the Premier League with Luton. That'd be exactly the same thing. You know what I mean? Tom Lockyer, a man I've got bundles of time for. Lovely fella, terrific footballer. Worked his way up to get there himself. So there's where they find themselves is a little bit of a surprise. But the scenes that I saw on Saturday at Kenilworth Road, yes, there's a bit of you look at the goal, which is a mistake. There's a sending off that gets evened up further along in the game. But the urgency that Kathryn's demanded there at Hull City was absolutely there to be seen at Kenilworth Road against a team that was chasing down, still chasing that one of those final promotion playoff places. So it's and again, comparison doesn't always necessarily work, does it? Because what you want from your side that you see in others isn't necessarily fair, because you've got to kind of be allied to yours through thick and thin. I mean, and this is definitely a position where they were in charge of it, and now they're not. And now hope's got to come into it, which is ultimately in football in terms. Sometimes I think that kills it, doesn't it? Well,
the permutation for the weekend is if City win, they are safe, no matter what anybody else does, because Derby play Stoke.
Yeah,
obviously both can't win. So if Hull City win, they are safe. If they lose, they're down straight as. If they draw, they could survive, but it would need one of Luton or Preston to lose. Preston away at Bristol City, who got tanked at Leeds last night, so Bristol City need to win. And Luton away at West Brom, who have fallen off a cliff in the last 6 weeks. So if City draw at Portsmouth and Preston lose at Bristol City, City would survive on goal difference, as would they would if Luton were to lose at West Brom. Either of Preston or Luton avoid defeat, City then have to win the game. But a win, to be clear, and they are safe and would relegate one of Derby, Stoke, Luton, or Preston. Kathryn, how are you feeling about?
Very, very straightforward. I mean, I probably alluded to the fact of other results earlier on as we were chatting, but that the context quite categorically, Baz, is as you say, completely correct, and that's what that sense of, as Kathryn is going into that game where the Derby game where you win and you're sorted, and like I said, that jeopardy potentially where you kind of go, well, almost we've done enough work to give ourselves a bit of rope, which doesn't make any sense at all, does it? From a common sense point of view, you go, can we get it sorted now so we can actually maybe enjoy the last day? Now it's that sense of, well, if City are drawing, I don't know, towards the latter stage of the game, you're then in territory of needing to know what the hell's going on at other places pretty swiftly, don't you? Because that then you're asking them to do something that consistently over the course of the season they haven't done, which is take control of a football game and kill the opposition off.
Go on, Kathryn.
Yeah, I think it's a strange situation to be in the bottom three but still have it in your own hands, and it must be one of the sort of first times that that's kind of happened before. And I think they're lucky in that sense because they could have been in a situation where they could win and still go down. They're lucky that they're in that situation where they know a win is enough, and hopefully you just kind of hope that they take that. But it's difficult because of the way they've been playing. I don't think they've played well in a game since the international break. I don't know what's happened since then because they'd had 4 games without defeat, came back from the international break, and as Baz said, they've scored 1 goal from open play. I'm not sure why that is, what's happened, but they've not been playing well. Portsmouth obviously is a tough place to go. Obviously they've got nothing to play for, but it's one of those grounds where their fans will be kind of in party atmosphere because they've stayed up maybe when they weren't necessarily expecting to earlier in the season. Whether their manager plays a rotated team or their strongest team, I don't know. All the pressure is going to be on City, and you just hope that they turn up. Like I say, they'll have that whole away end behind them. From start to finish, maybe not if they go like 2 or 3 goals down early on. Maybe then it might turn. But all being well, that away end will be, myself included. If anyone wants to say hello in Portsmouth, I'm actually staying over on the Friday night because I felt like if I feel like I'm preparing to go to a funeral or something, it's sort of like I might as well have a night by the sea. Just, have a nice evening before whatever.
And go walking into it, Reginald Perrin style.
Close enough to walk into it after the game.
You just see there, like, where was it you got clipped up and put it on the group? Was it Swansea?
Swansea, yeah.
Start looking like you were at a funeral.
It was after Matt Crooks had been sent off for that ridiculous kind of second yellow card, and then I just sort of sat there in the rain, fuming.
You see, you sat there and thought in not saying it's going to go the wrong way, but kind of full morning dress, not morning dresses in like but like black Scottish Widows type vibe.
Yeah, so yeah, if anyone's in Portsmouth on Friday night and fancies commiserating, hopefully celebrating in advance. But I'm sure Burnsy will be staying over on Friday. Maybe he'll buy the drinks for everyone.
Hopefully he's feeling better because he didn't do the game at the weekend because he was feeling poorly. I might have to take security now. Now I've got people.
Yeah, that's your fault.
Yeah, exactly. But before we finish, a couple of quick things to talk about. Prutts, it is seismic, this game, I'm always conscious about the kind of the living in the now situation, and everything now is the most important thing, and forgetting what's happened before. But in terms of City's, and maybe Kathryn's better placed than all of us to answer this question, but in terms of City's recent history, this game is huge, isn't it? And because if they get relegated, when they went down before, yes, as Kathryn said, there was various things that went wrong, but financially they were in really good shape. They went down with almost a clean slate. They didn't spend any money. They did it very tightly, and that enabled the club to be sold for nothing really to Adjon. Now they're going to go, if they were to go down, if they lose on Saturday, Saturday, and they go down, they're going down with. It's a club that have been, as their account state, are losing £500,000 a week. So there's going to have to be cutbacks. There's going to have to be staff that go and wage bills cut, and players that are kicked out because for whatever reason. So it's just unbelievably big for the future of this football club. And they had the benefit when they went down that it was COVID. There were no fans, so we don't know what impact. Did that have a positive impact because there was so much anger? And some of the grounds they went to, there were no fans, so they didn't get the response they would have done. I always think about the Gillingham away game on the first day of the season. It was empty. The Priestfield for a team coming down from the Championship would have been quite difficult. But that's not going to be there this time. So maybe League One is going to be even more difficult than it was 5 years ago. What's your assessment of it?
Yeah, it'll be. Yeah, it's. Yeah, again, I would defer to Kathryn's take on this, having been having skin in the game for such a long period of time. It feels like that, and that finite result of it being categorically City's to win or lose, City's Championship status to take care of themselves or not. That's what it boils down to. As we said, broadly, one game doesn't make a season. and the post-mortem would hopefully dive deeply into that if it ends up being devastation at the end of it. But one game can, for a week or two, gloss over a lot of things, can't it? If we suddenly see Cruxy popping up at the back post, towering header, suddenly him getting on everyone's nerves against Swansea, he's completely forgotten because he's done what he came to do, which was help save the club from relegation. So it would be, you can almost picture the scenes, and you don't want to get too carried away because it could be a glorious day, couldn't it, in the sunshine down there, where a team that's playing at the home ground, but celebratory because they're consolidated at a level they've not been at for a long time in Pompey. They'll be hopefully in a position where, I'm not saying they'll be willingly forgiving, but you know what I mean, maybe that focus you'd understand as human beings wasn't there. I was in exactly the same situation when I was at Wednesday. I told you about being crap at Swindon and Southampton, but the last day of the season was against Sheffield Wednesday was against Borough, and we needed to win, and that was literally, you win, you stay up, you lose or draw, you absolutely looking around for other results. And for half an hour, and again, there's levels, but it's possibly one of the most dominant displays I've ever been a part of. I did my bit in the middle of the pitch, which was running around, pointing at people, shouting and tackling, and our destructive players absolutely went to town on them. And it's quite rare in football that you get that, because a lot of it's hanging on and praying for the final whistle. But in that sense, there was a collective feeling going in half time, going, bloody hell, lads, this is actually, it's working, isn't it? This is what we've been told to do, and what we need to do is actually looks like it's good. And it did. In the second half, we almost enjoyed. Borough were fine and safe and weren't really, they had half a foot on holidays, I think. But so if you're a City fan and a player, that's hopefully the situation you find yourself in. But having also seen the Birmingham City one, the Paul Caddis last minute header, that the great escape for them several seasons ago, that sticks out as well. No matter how it's done, it will be absolutely celebrated and remembered, because again, I'm very, very intrigued to see what Kathryn's taken is, that it's as big a game in their recent history as I can possibly remember. You look at the playoff final, you look at relegation battles in the Premier League, yeah, I understand all that, but right here, right now, given the finances and what could be a sliding doors moment, it's as big as I can remember.
Kathryn, just before I come to you, will it change their mentality for Prutts? Yes. Earlier in the season, they were in the bottom three for a long time. They were in the bottom three the day that Ruben took over. They've been out of it for quite a while. They've been 5 points clear before the international break. That got cut to 3. Then it was 2. Now they're going into the final day in the bottom 3, knowing it's clarity. Yes, I know against Derby they knew that if they won they were safe, but there's no more chances now. This is game 46. If you win, you're safe. How would that change their mentality? But knowing that they are in the bottom 3 now, and if they lose, they are down.
Well, it goes back to what we were saying though about them being fundamentally risk averse. It feels like, doesn't it? So there's an outside chance that you keep it tight and you get a point, nick a point, that it could be okay. But there again, you're relying on other dynamics. I would, without having any inkling of how you would set up a football team in this particular situation from a management structure point of view, and talking more of a fan, which is hopefully who we're speaking to when you listen to this, there is no way you think you'd like to see him just go for it. Get a super attacking team on the pitch.
Get an early goal.
Defend for your lives. Pray to whoever that every single player is at least 7, hopefully more out of 10 for that particular day. Your creative players do their bit. Joe steps up. Matt Crooks steps up. The attacking players that have flattered to deceive, I think that's not too unfair a thing to say. If you're in the bottom 3, potentially you've all flattered to deceive. Actually, for 90 minutes, which is you'd love as a fan to see 46 games of consistency, but the whole City fans are asking for 90 minutes of your best. And Kathryn, that's not much, is it, to ask? Christ.
You just don't want to go down with a whimper, do you? I think if they go down losing at Portsmouth, it'll have felt like they've gone down with a whimper. Yeah. And I feel like Preston fans will probably think that as well if they're the team that end up in the bottom 3, given how kind of bad they've been for the last few weeks. You just want to see them give absolutely everything. And yeah, like we've said, I think last time when they went down to League One, that they went down with a whimper then. but there wasn't as much fear around the finances because you knew it had been run on like a shoestring budget to a certain extent, and that they were going to be all right in that league, even if they didn't get straight back up. We're not in a position where Birmingham were last season when they went down and they had a massive injection of money and you knew they were going to probably win that league. You look at the likes of Huddersfield and Rotherham, who are the other two teams that went down last season, they're not even in the playoffs in League One. That's how difficult a division it is. There's still a lot of big teams in there. There's clubs like Bolton who've been in there for a while. Obviously, Wrexham have just come out of it. Clubs that come up from League Two can sometimes, get straight up again. Stockport are in there. Charlton, obviously, one of these teams might go up through the playoffs, but that there is a real kind of fear that if they go down to League One, they could be stuck there for a long time and they're not going to just bounce straight back, especially with the finances and situation that they may find themselves in. And also just because the squad will probably be ripped up again. I can't imagine, I don't know how many players will stay. I mean, I don't know how many players would get a move to a better club given
Absolutely.
But I also don't know how many players we'd be able to afford to keep. I don't know what wages they're on, whether they've got stuff in their contracts that means they have to take a wage reduction. All their agents, they'll all be getting their agents on to try and find the moves if they do go down. They might have to sell someone like Charlie Hughes to keep the books, balance the books, because he's probably one of the few players that they might be able to get a few quid for. But it really is a huge day on Saturday, and you just hope that the players kind of feel that as much as the fans do. And that's my fear. My fear is that the players that go onto the pitch don't appreciate or just don't feel it as deeply as the supporters. And I just hope that they give absolutely everything, because like I say, the fans will give them everything on Saturday. They won't have any excuses in that sense.
Just before we go, a question to both of you, actually. Incidentally, they've cancelled the Player of the Year awards that were scheduled for tonight. They didn't feel.
When was that cancelled?
It was cancelled over the weekend. Ruben, it was a Ruben decision, I believe. He didn't feel it was appropriate to have an awards evening. They're still going to have the Player of the Year award. It's going to be given to a player, obviously, but the big evening that was scheduled at the MKM tonight for all the sponsors and stuff has been cancelled because the manager ultimately didn't feel it was appropriate to have that kind of night on the back of losing to Derby. I think if they'd have beaten Derby and they were safe, they would have had it. But because of obviously the weather situation is, I know Cardiff had theirs on Saturday night after they relegated. So, and I know Derby have been and ahhing about having theirs. They're doing it almost behind closed doors because they don't want. Yeah. In terms of Ruben Prutts and Kathryn as well, I guess this is a double-ended question. If they survive by the skin of their teeth on Saturday, is Ruben the man that gets the gig going forward to go through the summer and have his first full summer and then have a crack at next season? Or if they get relegated, does the owner make another change and look to bring in another manager and go again this summer? I'll go, Kathryn, you first.
I think for me right now, I think I would stick with him either way, because I do think he's shown enough. While I'm, as critical of kind of his management decisions on Saturday, I do think what he did with Reading in League One, a really difficult situation there, he'd find himself in another really difficult situation in League One. At least he's kind of, proven that he can deal with that and kind of get through it and get a team, playing reasonable football in that division. So I think if they went down, I would stick with him. I still think I would stick with him staying up, because I do think he's shown, at times this season, some really good things. And if he gets a summer, if he gets those players back that have been missing through injury, obviously something we've talked about this season, but maybe not mentioned as much today, that's kind of gone against him. Obviously the 3 ACL injuries, one of which was to probably the best player in Balumi. I know he might not be back right at the start of the season, but hopefully kind of not too long. I think I would probably stick with him, and I'd give him a bit of time and then see how it's going. But yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at with it right now.
Prutts?
Yeah, I can't say I think he's a good coach and say that he shouldn't be given the opportunity. So yeah, for continuity, which might sound a little bit backwards if you're talking about a team that's been relegated, it needs somewhere there needs to be some solid foundations. The thing is, there's plenty of good managers out on the market, isn't there, at the moment? But then to move Ruben on, there'll be a financial implication with that, on top of obviously the financial implications that City are already working with and on. It would need a comprehensive change and shift in kind of culture and atmosphere. And I do think that comes from within the club. As I said, the fans are well within the right to express their frustrations, just as they are to express how wonderful things are when things are going great. So my gut feeling would be to stick with him. I just think there's plenty of questions, as you said earlier on, to be asked. The owner, again, we're going off birthday points. He's the man that takes sole responsibility for however the season ends up on Saturday completely. And he'll know that. I mean, I've seen interviews with the fella, and I presume, I know you've spoken to him, Baz, and Kathryn, have you come across him like from an interview point of view?
Yeah.
He's very charismatic, generously spirited fella, but he's a businessman, isn't he, fundamentally? And when you are reveling in, and not reveling makes it sound like he's doing it just for one reason, but when you are taking fans on holiday and getting everyone involved in that, the flip side of that is dealing with their frustration when things aren't going so great, which is where they find themselves now. So there's so much for them to unpack and deal with. But chucking another manager out the door to start once again, I think would be maybe, again, you talk about how that first couple of months of the season was set back with the new manager in recruitment. You don't want to do that again, to make it either another slog in the Championship or to get yourself on the back foot in League One, because even though League One's full of teams, as we've alluded to, that are big and wanting to get out of it, even City dropping out the Championship inherently makes them one of the bigger targets in the division, don't they? The Birmingham City ones, it's a fascinating kind of not subject, but fascinating kind of case study, in the sense of we saw the devastation of them going down, but almost with the caveat of them having that clout to be able to do what they've done. Now, when you move back into the Championship, those financial stipulations change, don't they, with regards to how it's kind of managed and dealt with. Wrexham will find something similar as well, but their turnover, what you read reports today, is insane. So they'll climb back into the Championship. Well, Birmingham City climb back into the Championship on a much sounder footing than they would have been potentially by staying in the division, wouldn't they, and battling another season in the Championship. So I'm not saying I'm trying to say there's a silver cloud to relegation, because there isn't in City's case. The good thing is, as we've hammered home, that it's a simple case of winning a football match, which is a big statement because it's not simple.
Absolutely. On that bombshell, we'll leave it because we've gone well over time. I know lots of questions have come in about the ownership and is Adjun going to sell it? Lots of speculation about Canadian people and all that sort of stuff. I think we'll park that for now because obviously we've run over time. We've talked to death about the game. Those questions can be held back for after Portsmouth on Saturday. At this stage, just to quickly say, I don't get any impression that Adjun is going to sell the club. Selling a League One club, if it is to be a League One club with a lot of, with that's losing that kind of money a week, is not an easy thing and not a quick fix either. So we'll hold those questions for the post-mortem, irrespective of what happens on Saturday. If they stay up, there's one to be had. If they go down, obviously there's a lot as well. So we'll leave it there. Thanks to everybody that gets in touch. If you are going to Fratton Park on Saturday, have a safe trip down there and hopefully cross everything that City can go there and get the result they need. And we at least are talking next week about City being a Championship football club and not a League One club.
Well, Kathryn, where are you staying?
I'm staying near the front, like it's the stadium's obviously Fratton, isn't it? But I thought I'd stay near the sea. It begins with an S. I should probably check.
Southsea.
That's it. I'm staying near there.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to buy me a drink.
Yeah.
Or come and throw sticks at you.
Yeah.
Well, that too. Yeah. But they can
get yourself walking down the water, so get a bit of fresh air. Right.
We'll leave it there. Prutts, good luck on your big long Saturday, no doubt.
Yeah. It's I think we're at Coventry. Yeah, Coventry, Borough, and obviously keeping abreast on every single thing that's going on.
Yeah, Kathryn, safe travels down to Fratton, and we'll pick up again, hopefully next week when City have won the game and we can all at least relax a little bit knowing they are safe in the Championship. That's it for this episode of the 1904 Club. Up those Tigers.